I don't usually talk about this trip because whenever I bring it up, people assume I'm exaggerating or trying to scare them. But this happened in late 2021, on a camping trip in southern Laos, near a stretch of river between Champasak and the Bolaven Plateau. Me and two friends, Dara and Leon, backpacked through Southeast Asia that year. We'd grown tired of tourist spots and wanted real wilderness. A local fisherman pointed us toward a quiet riverside clearing. He warned us in broken English to avoid the long one, but we didn't understand what he meant. We thought he meant longboats or maybe snakes. We took it as a general be careful comment and moved on. The spot was perfect. A narrow river, thick trees overhead, the constant hum of insects. It felt secluded in the best way. We pitched our 3 tents close to each other, cooked noodles over a tiny stove, and spent hours watching fireflies around the water. Everything was normal until the first night. Around 1 a.m., I woke to a wet, dragging sound, like something large being pulled through thick mud. I sat up in my tent, listened. It wasn't walking. It was sliding, smooth and heavy, like a huge body pulling itself along the ground. I whispered to Leon's tent, "You awake?" He whispered back immediately, voice shaky, "You hear that too?" So yes, I wasn't imagining it. We unzipped our tents and stepped out quietly, flashlights in hand. The dragging stopped instantly, as if it recognized the sound of our zippers. We swept our lights across the riverbank. At first, nothing. Just trees and water reflecting our beams. Then I saw it. Across the river, maybe 15 meters away, something stood between the trees. It wasn't an animal shape I recognized. It was tall, too tall, but its body was strangely narrow, like it hadn't eaten in months. Its skin looked stretched, hairless, pale even in the dark. Its limbs were long, ridiculously long, arms hanging almost to its knees, and its head. It tilted, slowly, unnaturally, like someone testing how far a neck could bend. It didn't run. It didn't charge. It just watched us. Dara woke up and crawled out of her tent behind us, right as she whispered, "What is that?" The creature lowered itself to the ground, not by crouching, but by folding, like its joints didn't move the way ours do. And then it began moving again. That same dragging motion. Its arms pulled. Its legs barely helped. Slow, deliberate, toward the river. I think we all prayed at the same time that it couldn't swim. We eventually backed into our tents, zipped them shut, and waited. The creature never crossed the river that night. It didn't scream or howl. Its silence was worse. By morning, the only evidence was long trails in the mud on the opposite bank, as if something had slid and then stood up. The dragging grooves were almost 3 meters long, far larger than anything we could explain. We talked about packing up immediately, but we were stubborn. We had 3 days of supplies and a full itinerary. Plus, daytime was so peaceful we convinced ourselves we'd hallucinated half of it. Stupidest decision of my life. At sunset, the forest went dead silent. No insects, no frogs, no birds. Even the river felt quieter. We sat around a lantern instead of a fire. None of us felt brave enough to draw attention. By 9 p.m., Leon suggested sleeping in shifts. I agreed to take the first one. Dara climbed into her tent without arguing. Around 11 p.m., the dragging sound came again. Not across the river this time. Closer. Much closer. Right behind the tree line on our side. I froze. Leon crawled out of his tent quietly, eyes wide, holding the lantern. The light barely reached the trees, but something stood there. Not fully visible, just the outline of something tall, with those long arms hanging like ropes. It didn't step into the clearing. It swayed slightly, almost like it was listening. Then, it made a sound I'll never forget. A slow, wet inhale, like it had gills instead of lungs. Dara whispered from her tent, "Is it back?" The creature stopped swaying. It turned its head toward her voice. Leon rushed to her tent, whispering to keep quiet, but the damage was done. The creature stepped closer. I heard its weight on the leaves, not dragging this time. Walking, testing. We backed up slowly, all three of us huddling together near the lantern. The creature stopped just beyond the light. I swear we heard it sniffing. A strong gust of wind blew through the clearing and knocked the lantern over. The light went out instantly. That was when the creature moved. We heard it rush, not toward us, but toward the river. Heavy, thudding steps. Fast, desperate, as if the light had been the only thing keeping it at bay. The splash when it hit the water echoed across the clearing. Then, silence. Not even bubbles. We didn't sleep at all. As soon as the sky started turning gray, we packed up. We didn't talk. We didn't look across the river. We just left. When we reached the small village we passed earlier that week, the old fisherman saw us and immediately asked, "You see the long one?" This time, we understood, and none of us laughed. I don't know what we saw. I don't claim it was supernatural. Maybe it was an unknown species, or a rare mutation, or something that adapted to living in the remote wetlands. But whatever it was intelligent enough to stay hidden. I went camping with a small group of 4 friends in the remote hills of northern Laos. We weren't following any trails, just a map from an old travel blog and a vague sense of direction. By late afternoon, we found a clearing in a narrow valley, bordered by steep cliffs and a thin stream. It seemed perfect, quiet, isolated, untouched. We set up tents, gathered firewood, and cooked a simple dinner. Everything felt normal at first. The sky was clear, the river murmured gently, and the air was cool. But as night fell, an uneasy feeling settled over us. It started when one of my friends, Min, noticed something odd about the stream. The water was shallow and clear, but there were dozens of small objects scattered along the banks. Stones, twigs, and human-shaped silhouettes carved crudely out of wood. Each was only a few inches tall, yet some were positioned upright as if standing guard. We laughed nervously, assuming it was some kind of prank by locals or previous campers. But the further we looked along the stream, the more of them we found. Hundreds, maybe thousands, arranged with uncanny precision. Faces etched into the wood were crude, but somehow recognizable. Not like real people, but like memories of people you've seen before, in glimpses or dreams. We tried to ignore it and focus on the fire. By 11 p.m., the forest seemed heavier, quieter, as if holding its breath. Then came the sound, faint at first, of scraping, like sticks being dragged over rocks. Not enough to carry far, but close enough that it made our blood run cold. I stepped out of the tent to investigate. The moonlight reflected off the stream, and I froze. Someone, or something, had arranged new wooden figures around our campsite. They weren't there an hour ago. Smaller ones, maybe just 2 inches tall, carved in impossible detail. Some crouched, some lying face down, and some raised tiny arms in what looked like a plea. No one had moved from their tents, yet the objects were new. We debated leaving immediately, but none of us wanted to pack in the dark. By midnight, the scraping intensified, accompanied by low whispers. Not words we could understand, but syllables, repeated over and over, like a chant. The sound seemed to move from one side of the clearing to the other, circling us slowly. We huddled in the largest tent, refusing to step outside. Every now and then one of us would peek through the zipper. Nothing human was visible, Only the wooden figures, now dozens more, arranged in patterns that made no sense. Some pointed toward the tents, others toward the river, and a few were lying in the mud as if collapsed. By 3 a.m., Min couldn't take it anymore. He unzipped the tent slightly, whispered, "I just want to see," and reached out. That's when it happened. All at once, hundreds of the small figures toppled over in unison, clattering against rocks and mud. The sound echoed through the valley like a distorted percussion. At the same moment, the stream bubbled violently, sending ripples across the surface. Though the water had been calm all night, the chanting stopped. The forest went silent again. We didn't sleep. By dawn, the wooden figures had returned to their original positions, neat, upright, staring at the tents. Nothing else in the clearing had changed. No footprints, no marks in the mud, nothing. We packed as fast as we could, avoiding the river entirely. Not a word was spoken until we reached the nearest village, several miles away. None of us could explain what had happened. None of us ever went back to that valley. Even now, years later, I dream about the tiny wooden figures, how they moved without hands, how the river reacted, and the feeling that someone, somewhere, was silently watching from the shadows. In 2018, I went camping with a couple of old college friends in a remote valley in the Zagros Mountains of Iran. We had been hiking all day along narrow ridges and cliffs, carrying only minimal gear because we intended to stay one night. We found a small flat plateau surrounded by jagged rocks and sparse shrubs. The place was isolated. No trails, no signs of other hikers. Perfect for solitude. We pitched our tents and gathered a small pile of firewood. As dusk fell, the valley took on an eerie stillness. The wind died down entirely, and the mountains echoed even the smallest sounds. Everything seemed normal, but an odd metallic tang in the air made my stomach twist. After eating, my friend Amir noticed something strange. Faint scratches on the rocks around the plateau. They weren't deep, but they were long and jagged, as if someone or something had scraped the stone repeatedly over weeks or months. What made it worse was that the scratches formed patterns. Not words, not numbers, but angular shapes that reminded me of letters I couldn't read. Like a language half remembered from a dream. We shrugged it off, telling ourselves it was probably ancient markings. The sun set, leaving us in darkness. That's when we heard the first knock. It wasn't loud, just a soft tap against the rocks. We froze. One knock, then another, coming from different directions. We weren't alone, though we couldn't see anyone. The knocks had no rhythm, no pattern, but we felt deliberately watched. Amir tried to laugh it off, saying, maybe a falling branch or a rock settling. But the sound kept moving closer to our tents. Then came another noise, soft dragging, not heavy like a footstep, but slow, deliberate, scraping along the plateau. It circled us once, maybe twice. We held our breath, too scared to speak. The dragging stopped, and the valley fell completely silent again. I remember feeling a weight in my chest, like something was pressing on us from above, though there was nothing there. Hours later, just before dawn, I woke to a faint whisper. Not in English, not Persian. Just syllables, hissing. Impossible to understand. My other friends were asleep, or at least pretending to be. The whisper came closer. I couldn't see, but it felt like it was coming from the very rocks themselves, moving along the plateau, passing our tents. I didn't move. I couldn't. Eventually, the whisper stopped, leaving only the wind, which had returned just enough to rustle the sparse shrubs. When the sun rose, everything looked normal. The rocks, the scratches, the plateau, untouched, except that the patterns in the scratches had shifted slightly. Some shapes I was sure hadn't been there the night before. We packed quickly, our nerves shredded, and didn't speak on the hike back. Even in the nearest town, we avoided talking about the plateau. None of us have returned, and none of us have ever figured out what we saw.